jealous stepdaughter secretly fed me peanuts on our honeymoon, sending me to the ER. Now she's freaking out and threatening to quit college after her dad cut her off for the cruel prank. So I, 44F, got married last month to my boyfriend of 4 years, Jeff, 48M. He also has a daughter from a previous marriage, Addison, 18F. I don't know why, but for some reason, Addison has never liked me. Jeff and I started dating about 4 years ago since we had a couple of common friends and they thought that it would be nice to set us up. I had also been married before, but I did not have any kids. My divorce was finalized 7 years ago and it was not really a bad divorce, as such. My ex-husband and I just realized that we had fallen out of love and were more like friends, rather than partners. So we decided to mutually part ways and that's how that marriage ended. So we did not end on bad terms, but we are not friends anymore, we have not kept in touch. Jeff was also married before, as I had mentioned above, but unfortunately, his wife passed away 7 years after Addison was born. Jeff had had a couple of girlfriends after that but nothing too serious. So both of us had been single for a really long time and our common friends decided to set us up, which we are really thankful for because it turned out to be the best decision of our lives. And I have never had any relationship issues, only the mundane stuff. We get along really well, he understands me, and I really understand him. The only thing that I would say was a bit of a problem in our relationship was his daughter. I did not have a problem with her, just to be clear. But I always just got this vibe from her that she did not like me, and she believed that her father was too good for me. Which, I don't think is a bad thing, it just means that she thinks highly of her father and that's the way that it should be. But then acting like I'm not good enough for her father and constantly giving me weird looks or trying to be all snide around me and making me feel weird about myself, I don't know if it's the right way to go about appreciating her father. I did bring it up a couple of times with Jeff, at the beginning of our relationship, and I asked him if she was this way around all of his previous girlfriends. And just as I had expected, he told me that this is how she usually behaved whenever he brought home another woman, and he had been trying to talk to her and get her to stop behaving that way with his partners, since no woman appreciated this. And it would lead to a lot of fights, but eventually, he would always choose his daughter because that's his family. So it would almost always result in a breakup and he seemed pretty frustrated with it, but he told me that he couldn't help the situation and this is how it was, since she just refused to change and grow up. She had lost her mother when she was 7 years old and can be really tough for a child, so I decided to be a little compassionate towards her and ignore the way that she would behave with me. She could behave as badly as she wanted to get to me. I had made up my mind about it and I really liked Jeff, so it was easy for me to ignore her weird behavior. Besides, when I started dating Jeff, she was already 14. I knew that the teenage years could be a weird phase for kids and she was going through puberty, so it was quite natural for her to act like a brat. I did not have any kids of my own, but I had heard stories, and I knew that eventually, she would grow up and change. At least that's what I had expected. I was not about to get into drama with a 14-year-old, so I just continued to ignore her behavior. Then, last year, she went away to college, and by that time, she had already started changing her behavior. She did not give me any weird looks anymore and neither did she try to put me down, but I guess we had come to an unspoken agreement after 2 years of being together, in some sort of way, and she had realized that she would not be able to drive me away like she had driven away all the other women who had been involved with Jeff before me. So she had given up, trying to do so, and we came to a place of mutual respect and she stopped picking on me and I remained unaffected. Jeff proposed to me after she went away to college and shortly after that, we got married. It was a very small and intimate ceremony, and obviously, Addison was also present. I had expected her to be upset or at least a little put off, but she seemed quite okay with everything. So for that reason, her behavior at the wedding, I assumed that maybe she was finally coming around and warming up to me since she had been reasonably nice to me at the wedding. I guess I should have said my standard tire and not fallen for any of that BS because that really cost me. I had started to believe that maybe she was coming around and so, when she asked me if she could accompany us on our honeymoon, I ended up agreeing to it after giving it a little bit of thought and discussing it with Jeff, who also seemed to be on board with the idea. But there's a lot of context for that as well. I'm not a total idiot who allowed my adult stepdaughter, who hates me, to accompany me on my honeymoon. So Jeff and I had decided that we were going to go to Egypt for our honeymoon, since that's where one of our favorite novels was based and it's also a generally beautiful place. And Addison wanted to accompany us because she is a history major and Egypt would be the perfect place for her, and we sort of agreed with that. It has a really rich history and beautiful culture, so we did not want to deprive her of that and we agreed to let her tag along. She had asked us if she could accompany us 3 weeks before we were supposed to leave, and it took us 1 week to come to a decision about it. After we told her that we were okay with her coming along with us, she was really happy, and I was the one who broke the news to her, so she seemed really thankful to me. I will not lie, I was actually looking forward to bonding with her on the trip because I thought that it was about time that we put aside our differences from the past and started afresh, and I was planning on bringing that up during the trip, at some point, and then we would all have a really great time together. Because now, Jeff and I are going to be together for the rest of our lives, and I don't want to have any sort of unresolved issues with my stepdaughter. She was still in college since she had missed some classes, but she had come back home for the wedding and did not want to miss more, since she was also leaving to accompany us on the honeymoon and that would be another week or so, and only came back home on the day of our flight. The day that she came back home, she arrived about 3 hours before we were supposed to leave for the airport and everything was pretty rushed, so I did not really get time to speak to her properly or interact with her much. We were all in a rush and all of us really cared about just getting out of the flight and landing safely, and doing everything on time. I did not notice anything off about her behavior and there was absolutely no way I would have been able to predict what was going to happen once we landed. Everything went really smoothly while we were departing, and even on the flight, things were pretty smooth. Once we landed at the airport in Egypt, we took a cab and we went to the hotel. We were pretty tired, and especially Addison, since she had traveled the entire day, so all of us decided that we had better get some rest after the long flight, and in the evening, we would go out. We had decided early on that we would stay at the same hotel, but Addison would have a different room on a different floor so that Jeff and I would get to properly enjoy our honeymoon. And I think that was more than fair, given the fact that we had at least allowed her to accompany us. Jeff was napping in the room, but around 1 hour after we had reached the hotel, I woke up because Addison was calling me and she apparently wanted to go out and get some lunch. I did not find that because she didn't have a proper meal on the flight, and she wanted company, so I agreed with her. She invited me to her room. She told me that we could just sit in her room and eat since she had already ordered something special for the both of us. I thought that it was really nice of her, so we got to talking and I did not notice anything we had going on. Then, we got the food and I was a little skeptical about trying out the dessert because it looked really weird and sloppy, but the guy who brought it to us made it exactly according to the instructions that had been given to them by Addison, and even she said that she had read about this dessert, which was apparently traditional Egyptian dessert that she had read about online, and I don't remember what she came up with, but it was not something that I had before. I did not want to hurt anybody's feelings, so I decided to try it out. And if it's a really bad mistake, because the next thing that I remember, I woke up in the ER because I had the worst allergic reaction I have had in the last 10 years. Apparently, she had instructed them to use a lot of peanut butter in the dessert, and I am deathly allergic to peanuts. In the dessert that she had ordered, she had specifically instructed them to use a lot of peanut butter in it, and then, she had told them to use a lot of vanilla ice cream and dates to cover the smell of the peanut butter. Unfortunately, I hadn't smelt the dish before I tried it, and I just had a couple of bites without even thinking about it. That was really enough for me to have a terrible reaction to the stuff, and that's how I ended up in the ER. I just remember my throat closing up and having trouble breathing after I had a few bites, and I knew that there was something really weird about the dish, but there was nobody else in the room apart from Addison, and I knew that she was crazy, but I'm sure that she was not crazy enough to let me die in front of her, so I yelled at her to bring me my EpiPen from my room. Thankfully, she had the sense to realize that something had gone horribly wrong, so she instantly called the receptionist and told them to get an ambulance for me, and then alerted Jeff to what was going on. I don't remember much after that since it was all a blur and I was really struggling to just keep breathing. I had to be taken to the nearest hospital, and there, they treated me in the ER. This was 3 days ago and I'm still in disbelief about what happened. Jeff and I are still in Egypt, for the record, but Addison has been sent home. Once I was discharged from the hospital and came back to the hotel, I narrated the entire incident to Jeff. All that he had known was what he had gathered from the hotel authorities, that Addison had ordered a dessert loaded with peanut butter and had served it to me. The next thing they knew, I was being rushed out of the hotel to the ER because I had a severe allergic reaction. The hotel staff made it very clear that nobody had mentioned anything about being allergic to peanuts, and they were just adhering to the instructions that they had been provided with. Nevertheless, they still apologized for whatever had happened, even though it was not their fault. Jeff had already had a one-on-one conversation with Addison about what had happened, and she had been really scared, so he had just yelled at her while we were in the hospital, and she had refused to comment on anything. I had consumed such copious amounts of peanut butter that they had to keep me overnight to observe if I had any other symptoms or whatever. The next morning, I went back to the hotel with Jeff and Addison, and she did not say anything to anybody for the rest of the time that she was there. Once we were back at the hotel, I explained everything that had happened to Jeff, while Addison remained in her room. Once he had heard me out, he was furious and immediately